tracking the virus and improving vaccines. Hi there, everyone. It's Jeff, and this is Plain English, where we help you upgrade your English with current events and trending topics. Today's lesson is number 408, and that means JR, our trusty producer, has uploaded the full lesson to plainenglish.com/408. In today's lesson, it's caused by a highly transmissible virus, and that virus jumps from person to person via respiratory droplets released when we cough, sneeze, talk, and breathe out. Hand washing, hand sanitizer, social distancing, and mask wearing can all slow the spread. Symptoms of the disease include fever, chills, sore throat, and, in severe cases, difficulty breathing. Most people recover in a few days, but it can be deadly, especially in the elderly and those who have compromised immune systems. Globally, tens of millions of people are infected each year. 3 to 5 million cases are severe, and between 250,000 and 500,000 people die annually. Is this the scary future of COVID-19? Nope. It's the everyday reality caused by influenza, that other highly contagious respiratory virus that you might have forgotten about. And on today's lesson, we'll talk about how the flu has been in hiding the last 2 years and what that might mean for when it finally re-emerges. The expression we'll review today is come to pass, and we have a quote of the week. Flu season traditionally lasts from October to April in the Northern Hemisphere, from April to October in the Southern Hemisphere, and year-round in the tropics. It spreads most commonly when the weather is cold and people are indoors. For that reason, it's most intense in cooler climates. Last fall, health experts in the Northern Hemisphere were bracing themselves for a twindemic, 2 concurrent pandemics of respiratory illnesses, COVID-19 and influenza. Fortunately, it didn't come to pass. The influenza season around the world was extremely mild in 2020. Experts believe that's due to 2 factors. First, all the preventative measures that guard against the spread of COVID-19 also worked against influenza. With everyone cooped up at home, wearing masks in public, and keeping our distance, we inadvertently suppressed the spread of influenza. The other possible explanation is that people did get the flu, but they didn't report it to their doctors, or their diagnosis was mistaken for COVID. Misdiagnosis cannot fully explain the reduction in 2020 flu cases, and experts agree that many fewer people suffered from the flu last year than in a typical year. That saved us from having to deal with dual pandemics. But it also might make the resurgence of the flu, when it does come, that much worse. When we're exposed to influenza, we develop antibodies that fight the virus. The antibodies are the strongest in people with the strongest immune systems, but regardless, they fade over time. In a typical flu season, people are exposed to low levels of the virus even if they don't suffer symptoms. So, every fall and winter, people build up antibodies against the flu virus that help protect them against a stronger infection later. That didn't happen last year because we were all inside. So, when influenza starts spreading again, the general population will have less natural immunity built up than it would have had in a typical year. There is another danger, and that is related to vaccines. Influenza is caused by a family of viruses, and every member of that family looks and acts a little differently. In any given year, a handful of flu strains is in circulation. Vaccine makers, therefore, need to know what strains to build into their vaccines, but it's impossible to know for sure which strains will circulate in the upcoming season. It is, however, possible to guess. The World Health Organization, the WHO, does the guessing. They meet twice a year to study the existing global incidence of influenza, and they recommend 4 strains to be included in the upcoming season's vaccines. They base this recommendation on a program called the Global Influenza Surveillance and Response System, a network of scientific labs in 123 countries that test for influenza year-round. The WHO uses that data to study which strains are circulating in which places, and they make an educated guess about what will circulate in the upcoming 6 months. The problem this year is that the World Health Organization doesn't have a large sample size to study. In a typical year, about 17% of the samples collected by the global monitoring system are positive for influenza and therefore provide important data to the WHO, 17% in a normal year. Last year, just 0.2% of collected samples were positive. With far fewer data available to analyze, the WHO has far less confidence in its educated guess than normal. Flu vaccines are less effective than the COVID vaccines we've been hearing about, too. In a typical year, a flu vaccine is 70% effective against infection in the general population, but only about 50% effective in the elderly. In part, that's because of the guesswork involved, although it's also because of the long lead time necessary to make a flu vaccine. Remember that the WHO meets twice a year to determine the vaccine makeup for the upcoming year. The meeting in February determines the vaccine makeup to be delivered in October in the Northern Hemisphere, while the meeting in September determines the makeup to be delivered in March to the Southern Hemisphere. The makeup of the vaccine is determined at least 6 months before the vaccine will be delivered. That's because drug makers must incubate the virus in chicken eggs, extract the virus, and then build and ship the vaccines. It takes a long time to make a vaccine this way. During that long wait, different influenza strains could spread, reducing the effectiveness of the vaccines before they're even produced. I want to leave you with a little bit of good influenza news before we finish. The development of mRNA vaccines against COVID-19 may be applicable to influenza vaccines too. Both Moderna and Pfizer, which make mRNA vaccines against COVID-19, have mRNA influenza vaccines in clinical trials. These can be produced much faster, ultimately reducing the time between identifying the strains and delivering the immunity to the public. If COVID looks like it will become an endemic disease, meaning that it's always with us at a low level, then mRNA vaccines against both the flu and COVID-19 can be distributed at the same time. And there are new tests that can detect both diseases, improving their diagnosis. I'm almost positive I had the flu this year. I got sick the day after I got back from Europe, and it was bad. I had fever, chills, cough, sore throat, headache, muscle aches, and it lasted more than a few days. I was convinced that I had caught COVID, but I went to get tested 2 days in a row, and both times the results were negative. By the time I saw a doctor, I was mostly better. They didn't even bother to test for influenza. But that just shows you how we're all focused on the one thing that's top of mind. I got tested twice for COVID, but it didn't occur to me until days later that it might actually be influenza that I had. If so, it was an early case that would have been late September. So, of course, I got my flu vaccine after I got better. I guess I have double immunity now. Anyway, don't forget your flu vaccine this year either. Today's English expression is come to pass. Broadly speaking, when something comes to pass, it happens. That's it. Come to pass means to happen. However, we would use it in specific circumstances, so let's walk through some of those now. Number one, we use this expression when we predicted, expected, or feared something would happen, and that thing either happened or didn't happen. So we start with a prediction, and then we see if reality matches up with that expectation. Did the thing we predicted come to pass? Did it really happen? Earlier in today's lesson, you heard that health experts feared a twindemic, a twin pandemic of COVID-19 and influenza last fall. Luckily, that didn't come to pass. So they feared that we would have a dual pandemic. That was the prediction. Fortunately, it didn't happen. We didn't have a twin pandemic because influenza was so mild last year. The twin pandemic didn't come to pass. In La Palma, Spain, the Cumbre Vieja volcano is erupting, at least as of when I'm writing and recording this lesson. On September 11th, there was seismic activity under the volcano. Geologists predicted that these earthquakes could lead to an eruption. On September 19th, the eruption came to pass. Some scientists studying that volcano say that at some point in the future, there could be an enormous eruption that causes the volcano to collapse into the ocean. That could send enormous waves crashing onto the coasts of Britain, Africa, and North America, potentially inundating cities like New York and Boston under a massive tsunami. That has not come to pass. Let's hope it never does come to pass. You can also use this to talk about what might happen in the future. You can say something may come to pass. When you do that, you're saying that something might happen in the future. Can you imagine a world in which Facebook and Instagram aren't the dominant social media networks? At Facebook themselves, they certainly can imagine that. The youngest users prefer Snapchat and TikTok. It may come to pass that Facebook and Instagram are knocked from their perch as the leading social media networks. It hasn't come to pass yet, but it might happen in the future. Finally, you can use come to pass when you cast doubt on a possibility. As you know, Britain left the European Union. Scotland, however, did not support the move. Many Scottish residents had wanted independence from Britain even before Brexit. A vote to leave failed in 2014. Well, now the Scottish National Party is itching for another vote on independence. If Scotland successfully votes to leave the United Kingdom, then it could set off a wave of independence movements all over, even in Europe. Northern Ireland, part of the UK, and Catalonia, a province of Spain, may also vote for independence. At this point, we don't know if that will come to pass. We don't know if that will happen. But it's a possibility, even if a remote one. We can also say the chances of that coming to pass are low. Today's quote of the week is from newspaper columnist David Brooks. He said, "Character is built during the confrontation with your own weakness." His point was that we can identify the parts of our own personalities and characters that we don't like and confront those head on to improve. Character is built during the confrontation with your own weakness, says David Brooks. And that's all for today. Have you heard the term Instagram for kids? The idea is for Instagram to develop a product specifically for kids 13 years old or younger. On Thursday's lesson, you'll learn whether that's likely to come to pass or not. If you can't wait for Thursday, however, and you want even more plain English, you can always get it on our website, plainenglish.com. If you join as a free member, you will be able to explore our over 400 lessons, all organized by topic. And you can now create your own customized playlist of plain English lessons. As you browse the site, you might see lessons that you want to review later. Just click that bookmark button at the top of the page, and it will be added to your own personal playlist on your dashboard. We worked hard on that feature this year, and we're really happy to share that functionality with members of every level, including our free level members. If you're not a member yet, just go to plainenglish.com and sign up. The first level is free, no credit card required. You know, some places ask you to put your credit card in for a free product. That's not how we roll. It's really free, no credit card required, so there's no downside. Just go to plainenglish.com and you'll see what to do from there. See you Thursday.